winery was founded in 1823, so I'm today sixth generation. I run the winery together with my sister Anna and my brother Clemens, all in different departments. And before, so the beginnings were actually we were carriage makers, the first generation, and we started with wine distribution more so, and then the second generation started with real winemaking, so in 1855. And I think over time it definitely changed a lot. Of course, every generation has different difficulties, different changes, different different situations they're in and what they have to adapt to. I think my father, when he took over in '74, my aunt was leading the winery because his father died when he was 12 years old, so he was obviously too young to run the winery. So my father took over the winery in '74, and I think for him, he grew up with my grandmother. She already did her vegetable garden in a biodynamic way, and for him, he grew up with it. And so it was clear that one day he would like to have the whole winery transformed to organic or biodynamic farming. But of course, in the '70s and the '80s, there were different. I think it was definitely a different situation, especially for Alto Adige. Alto Adige back in those days was definitely not recognized for a lot of quality. It was more of table wine, more of quantity rather than quality. And I think for him, it was as a first step, it was important that that you kind of come together as well private producers, independent producers, to kind of try to put Alto Adige on a wine map and give the wine regions an importance. We have this beautiful diversity in Alto Adige, so it's a lot of different varieties we work with due to the mountains. We're in the middle of the Alps, the Dolomites, and that I think so. The first move was, or the first focus was towards quality, and then we started with first experiments towards biodynamic agriculture in the '80s, '90s. But then the first vineyard that was really transformed to and worked in a biodynamic way was only in 2004. And I think the way since then, I think our mind always, or our mindset is very much always more and more towards a healthy agriculture. We have our own vineyards, which are all cultivated in a biodynamic way, but we also work with farmers in Alto Adige. For over 20 years, I'd say, we are working more and more towards a healthy agriculture. I would say that, of course, our own vineyards, they're worked in a biodynamic way for a long time now. But in Alto Adige, it's quite a tradition as well to work with farmers in and around, in this case, in the region. We have around 60 partners we work with. It's an old tradition because you are in the middle of the mountains, so space is limited. And as well, some of those collaborations go back to my grandfather. They are passed down on generations, which is also very nice. And it's a very tight collaboration, so we try to motivate those partners. Since I think 2012, we tried really to put a focus on that as well, to have one day hopefully, or we were hoping that our farmer partners would as well work organic and biodynamic. And 2024 we actually reached that goal, so all of our wines are now organic or biodynamically certified, which is great. So it's almost 150 hectares, and I think of course there are different challenges we face today. Climate change is a huge topic, but I think we have a huge experimental drive. My father started getting interested in climate change in the '80s, so he already started the work, and we can play with so many different grape varieties today. We can go in altitude, which is amazing in Alto Adige, to get this beautiful natural freshness. And I would say our stylistic in general is very much this mirror to our region. We are an Alpiners region, so we try to make wines that are elegant, fresh, vibrant. And so, of course, climate change is a huge topic that we try to adapt to and move with it.
We do have approximately 50 hectares, which are mainly here in the southern part. So we are here in the southeast part of Alto Adige on this beautiful Dolomitic limestone. And we do have other farms in a way, which are located a little further north. So the majority is here in Maghreb, and there's one Holmigbeck, which is a beautiful hill around the lake Caldaro. Then there's Crassus, another single vineyard a little further north in Appiano. And then there's a small vineyard in heart of Bolzano, which is Lilleborg, where we grow Lagrein. And all the hectares from our own in our property are farmed biodynamically since 20 years, 2003, 2004. Our father moved to biodynamics and started schooling all vineyards to biodynamics, having already did the first experiments in the 90s. So then we switched in biodynamics 20 years ago. And then we do have partnerships with small partners, which are not, which are in a certain way vintners, small partners we work with, and they're spread all over Alto Adige. And that's the beauty, even though we have maybe the majority of our vineyards maybe more in the southern part, in the Bassa Pesina of Alto Adige. Through them, we can find places also in Valisarco, which is a place further north from Bolzano towards Brno. We can find places in Merano, and where you grow different grape varieties. So I think one of the most beautiful things is we in Alto Adige, thanks to our diversity, geologically, but also different altitudes, or having vineyards on 250 and 1,300 meters, you can grow many different grape varieties. And so Alto Adige has approximately 25 grape varieties. And through those partners, we can try to find the right spot for each of those. We love the diversity what we have here. So of course it's a little bit confusing maybe sometimes for the market, because it's not a region where you might maybe think immediately of one or two grape varieties like you do in Burgundy, for example. Now everyone knows, okay, Burgundy, you have Chardonnay, you have Pinot Noir, of course you have Aligocé and Gamay, but these are the main focus here. Piedmont is the same. Tuscany in a certain way is also the same. No? They get their identity to one or two grape varieties. We don't. We have more than 25 grape varieties, and that's, I think, historical. Maybe from history. So certain international grape varieties came here 200 years ago, like Chardonnay, like Carmenère, like Cabernet Franc, like Merlot, like Cabernet Sauvignon, and so there were, like, for example, Margaret in the southern part was a spot which my grandfather already found Chardonnay, for example. So we were jumping on those international grape varieties, or we got interested in those international grape varieties around 100 years ago. And so our main grape varieties are Chardonnay, Cabernet, Pinot Grigio, Pinot Bianco, I would say. But then, as I mentioned, the beauty of Alto Adige is our diversity, so having the right partners where we can grow maybe Gewürztraminer or a Riesling high up on 1,000 meters, or Sauvignon maybe on more volcanic soil. So this is a lot of fun. Maybe it's a little bit more complicated to communicate on the market. But I think from a perspective from a climate change, it can be another advantage to have the knowledge about to grow more than 25 grape varieties here, because I think with the climate change we also need to understand, okay, what do we need to do differently in future. And if we have a different temperature, we already have a 3 degrees increase in the last 30 years, so which is massive for a grapevine, you know. So for example, in these areas we can't grow any Pinot Grigio anymore, so we still keep the old wines, the old ones that we have, but I would never do a new Pinot Grigio vineyard here in southern part on 250 meters. So either you find new areas, or you need to move with certain grape varieties, or you need to work maybe differently with skin and stem contact, or also maybe here we should think differently and think, okay, which grape varieties can be interesting for the future. So we are extremely happy that our father already in the 80s started to get interested in climate change, and so he started to experiment with new grape varieties. So even more, we have actually in our winery even more different grape varieties, because we have also Assyrtiko, Tannat, Roussanne, all these experiments he started to do in the 80s. And that's a lot of fun to have also Tannat or Assyrtiko, which are 40 years old. So you have a beautiful experience with those grape varieties, and then of course you can again here try to understand better which grape variety suits in which areas. So winemaking philosophy, I would say, is underlining, of course, the approach that we have outside. So we try to intervene as less as possible. So what we do is we use a little sulfur. Maybe because we don't have the courage yet to say, okay, the wine is fine without sulfur when it leaves the winery and it arrives, I don't know, in Tokyo or New York, it's the same wine. So it's something where we need to get closer, slowly, step by step, to maybe reduce. We already have through Demeter standards, of course, the reduced limits of sulfur. So all wines in a certain way are spontaneously fermented. And we don't want to add any product to it except maybe a little bit of sulfur. We try to make our wines without having the necessity to use acidity or without adding yeast and enzymes. And therefore, I think it's important to see always wine as a sum of components. Especially as a biodynamic producer, we need to look at one vineyard, but we need to split it in many different parcels. And those parcels we need to see differently as components. Maybe one parcel has the ripeness a little earlier, and the next, the parcel beside it could be maybe that we find the crunchiness a week later. So maybe we harvest it 1 week later. With one parcel we might go into stainless steel, with one we might go into large cask, with one we do maybe skin stem contact, with one we just do skin contact, with one we press directly. So having this split, the split of different components and working with differently and do micro vinifications, it helps us to leverage certain characteristics in our wine. So maybe with the one that we harvest a little earlier, we get the beautiful acidity and the beautiful tension. The one that maybe we let hang longer, we get a little bit more structure. So we need to think a lot in components and to do small vinifications in order at the very end to blend those components together at the very end. So even if some wines are single vineyard wines, they're divided into plots. Sometimes it's more interesting to think of grape varieties, but think of different terroirs. So trying to limestone, for example, gives you a structure. Metamorphic soil gives you much more verticality. So you try to get out certain characteristics through the terroir. That's also another thing. So that's a little bit more, trying to micro-vinify and to think as wines as some of many different components. I like wines that make me like wines where you naturally think, I want to have another sip. And normally these are wines that have a certain structure, but they're never fat, they're never high in alcohol. They have a certain tension, they have a crunchiness, they have a freshness in a certain way. But it doesn't mean that they need to restructure as they have structure, absolutely. But a beautiful vertical structure. And I like wines which don't necessarily need to have be high in alcohol. Some things where I easily could finish the bottle by myself. This is something what I love to drink also with friends.